It's been kept hidden from the media and even state senators and delegates, but we could soon know the exact findings of an official state investigation into allegations against the Virginia Parole Board. The governor's chief of staff announced today that they are working to send the state inspector general's full report to the 6 highest ranking members.
At 3:18 a.m., inside the Records Compliance Office of the Georgia State Board of Pardons and Paroles in Atlanta, a junior case analyst named Elena Marsh was completing an overnight verification pass on a stack of parole hearing files when she noticed something in one of them that she could not immediately explain. The file belonged to an inmate named Damon Reeves, age 41, sentenced 11 years earlier to a 22-year prison term for armed trafficking and conspiracy. The file showed that Reeves had been granted early release at a parole hearing 8 months prior. The decision had been unanimous. The board chairman's signature was on the release authorization. The supporting documentation included a rehabilitation report, a clean disciplinary record, and a community reintegration plan filed by a private reentry services contractor. Elena had not flagged the file because of the decision itself. She had flagged it because of a routine cross-reference she ran on every early release file as part of her audit queue. Damon Reeves had been arrested again 4 months after his release. That was not unusual on its own. Recidivism happened, but the new arrest had been for the same category of offense: trafficking, organized criminal conspiracy, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He had been arrested with 2 associates, both of whom were also recently paroled inmates who had originally been sentenced for similar offenses. Elena pulled the parole files for the 2 associates. Both had been released early. Both decisions had been unanimous. Both had been signed by the same board chairman. She pulled the next 10 files in her queue and ran the same cross-reference. 4 of the 10 flagged the same pattern: inmates with serious organized crime convictions, early release granted, re-involvement in similar offenses within months, same chairman's signature on every authorization. By 5:46 a.m., Elena had identified 23 files inside her audit batch where the pattern repeated. She filed an internal escalation report and copied the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Public Integrity Unit. By 10 a.m., the report had been forwarded to the FBI's Atlanta field office. By 2 p.m., federal investigators were quietly pulling 9 years of Georgia Parole Board records. What Elena Marsh had found in the middle of a routine overnight audit was the visible edge of a bribery network that had been operating inside the Georgia State Board of Pardons and Paroles for nearly a decade. At 8:22 a.m. the following morning, FBI forensic analysts began running cross-verification queries on every early release decision authorized by the Georgia State Board of Pardons and Paroles over the previous 9 years. The scope was significant. The board reviewed approximately 18,000 parole decisions annually. The query alone took 4 hours to complete its first full pass. The first results came back at 2:14 p.m. Across the 9-year window, the board had authorized 2,840 early release decisions that fell into a specific statistical anomaly. The decisions involved inmates convicted of offenses tied to organized criminal networks, drug trafficking, racketeering, organized armed robbery, money laundering, and conspiracy. The early releases had been granted at rates significantly higher than the historical baseline for those offense categories, and significantly higher than the rates produced by other parole boards in comparable jurisdictions. Within the 2,840 flagged decisions, 1,640 of the released inmates had been rearrested within 18 months for offenses tied to the same criminal organizations they had been originally convicted of working with. Analysts pulled the authorization records. Every one of the 2,840 flagged early release decisions carried the same internal authorization designation inside the Georgia State Board's case management system: Chair-Exec-3. That code was not a panel-level authorization. It was not a deputy chair authorization. Chair-Exec-3 was a board chairman-level executive override, a designation reserved exclusively for the chairman of the Georgia State Board of Pardons and Paroles. The chairman was a man named Reginald Crane, 64 years old, appointed to the board 14 years earlier, promoted to chairman 9 years earlier. The pattern began in his first month in the role. If you believe corruption like this should be brought into the light, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment exposed below. Investigators began tracing the payment chain that had compensated Reginald Crane for the favorable parole decisions. The payments did not flow into Crane's accounts directly. They moved through a layered network of shell companies registered across Georgia, Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands. 21 companies in total. Names selected to sound institutional and unremarkable. At 4:38 p.m., FBI cyber analysts traced the encrypted communications channel that had coordinated the bribery payments with the released inmates and their criminal networks. The channel had been routed through a private server registered to a criminal justice consulting firm called Sentinel Reform Strategies, LLC, operating out of a commercial office in Buckhead. Sentinel Reform Strategies did not appear in any state contractor database. It had no active public contracts, but it had filed corporate paperwork in Delaware 7 years earlier. The registered agent on the filing was a name that returned a result inside federal employment records within minutes. Marcus Halverson, 63 years old, former deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons in the Southeast region. Before that, 14 years as a senior policy analyst at the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs. Halverson had spent over 25 years on the federal and state sides of the criminal sentencing and parole system. He had personally written guidance memos used by parole boards across the southeastern United States. He had served on review committees that established the very statistical baseline tools that the FBI was now using to identify Crane's anomalous decisions. He had retired from federal service 10 years earlier. Within 8 months of his retirement, he had been quietly retained by individuals connected to 2 major southeastern organized criminal networks as a private consultant. The retention was not documented in any public filing. It existed entirely inside the encrypted communications archive. His role inside the operation was structural. He understood which inmates would be statistically least likely to attract scrutiny on early release. He understood how to draft community reintegration plans that would pass standard board review. He understood which categories of offense would draw the least attention from federal authorities if recidivism followed. And he understood, from his years on the federal side, exactly which audit pathways and statistical review protocols the system was designed to use. He built the operation to avoid every one of them. Inside the encrypted archive, his code name was The Counselor. A message in the archive, dated 4 years into the operation, read, "The board does not need to be wrong. The board needs to be reasonable. We give them reasonable on paper. The decision follows." Reginald Crane was the signature. Marcus Halverson was the system that produced the signature. At 6:12 p.m., a federal judge in the Northern District of Georgia signed simultaneous search and arrest warrants for 12 locations across the state. At 6:44 p.m., the order went out. Execute. Location 1, Georgia State Board of Pardons and Parole's headquarters, Atlanta. Agents entered through the administrative wing under federal warrant. The facility's state security cooperated. Crane was in the building, in his office, attending what was scheduled to be a routine evening review session. He was detained without resistance. Inside his office, agents recovered 3 desktop computers, an external hard drive concealed inside a hollowed-out legal reference volume on his bookshelf, and a locked credenza containing printed parole decision summaries marked with handwritten reference codes that investigators did not yet understand. Approximately $112,000 in cash was found in a separate desk drawer. Location 2, Reginald Crane's estate, Sandy Springs. Crane's wife and adult son were present at the residence. Inside the home, agents recovered 4 burner phones, a home office laptop with an active encrypted messaging session, and a hidden floor safe in the primary closet containing approximately $480,000 in cash, 8 gold bars, and offshore banking documentation tied to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Panama, and Switzerland. Location 3, Sentinel Reform Strategies Office, Buckhead. Marcus Halverson was inside the office at the time of the raid. A document shredder was operating. Inside a back office, behind a built-in cabinet, agents found a black rack-mounted server, running, active, and transmitting. Cyber analysts began extraction immediately. Halverson did not resist arrest. Location 4, Peachtree Reentry Solutions Records Facility, Marietta. DEA agents led entry. The facility, on paper, stored client files for the largest of the shell company reentry contractors. In practice, the facility was operating as a coordination point for the criminal networks that had been buying early release decisions. Inside the facility, agents found a hidden interior room behind a false wall in the records storage area. The room contained approximately $3.4 million in undeclared U.S. currency, 2 pallets of wholesale quantity prescription opioids, a small inventory of synthetic stimulant medications, and operational records linking the facility to coordinated drug distribution networks across the Southeast. Location 5. Marcus Halverson's residence, Roswell. Halverson was already in custody at his office. Inside the residence, agents found a home office server concealed inside a built-in cabinet in a private library, backup drives spanning the full 9 years of the operation, a wall safe containing approximately $620,000 in cash and personal financial records of the offshore accounts, and a hidden floor compartment containing 4 foreign passports, 3 in different names. At 12:48 a.m., analysts completed their first full pass through the recovered server data from the Buckhead office. The operation had a name inside the archive, the Gatehouse File, a reference, according to one message in the archive, to the role the board played within the criminal justice system, a gate that decisions had to pass through. The Gatehouse File contained the complete operational architecture of the Bribery network, a 9-year schedule of every early release authorization that had been prearranged with criminal organizations, the corresponding bribe payment record for each authorization, a corporate ownership map of all 21 shell companies, the U.S. real estate beneficial ownership chart, the offshore consolidation account chart, and a detailed accounting of Halverson's personal share of the operation's net proceeds over the 9 years. Halverson had also built a separate insurance partition, a private archive of payments made to Crane personally, communications between Halverson and 4 other individuals whose roles ranged from offshore banking liaisons to representatives of the 2 major criminal networks the operation served, and a complete record of every operational decision Crane had personally authorized in connection with the bribery scheme. Halverson had built the archive for one reason: control. If Crane ever tried to walk away or shift blame, Halverson had enough documentation to destroy him before he could destroy Halverson. That archive was now in federal hands. By 2:30 a.m., 36 individuals were in federal custody. Reginald Crane, Marcus Halverson, 2 deputy board members who had been routing favorable case files through Crane's authorization queue. All 2,840 flagged early release decisions were referred for emergency judicial review. The state legislature was notified that a full forensic audit of the board's authorization protocols would be required as a condition of continued state-federal criminal justice cooperation. The detail that stayed with investigators after the arrests was not the scale of the money, it was the second layer of victims. The 1,640 inmates who had been released early through the bribery network had returned, in significant numbers, to active criminal activity. Investigators identified, across the 9-year window, at least 412 documented violent or serious offenses committed by the released inmates after their early release, 84 homicide cases, over 200 armed robberies and aggravated assaults, more than 100 narcotics trafficking and weapons offenses involving identified victims. Every one of those offenses had been committed by someone who, on paper, the Georgia State Board of Pardons and Paroles had determined had been sufficiently rehabilitated for early reintegration into society. Every one of those determinations had been signed by Reginald Crane. Every one of those signatures had been paid for. For 9 years, the criminal organizations operating across the Southeast had effectively held a back-channel asset they could activate at will, a pipeline that could move their senior operators out of prison years before their sentences were complete, returning them to active leadership inside their networks, while the parole system itself maintained the appearance of routine administrative decision-making. Elena Marsh, the junior case analyst whose flagged report opened the case, returned to work 3 days after the raids under federal protection. The recidivism cross-reference she had run was not formally required by the audit protocol. It was a personal habit she had developed in her first year on the job. The board's official protocol did not flag rearrests after early release unless they occurred within 30 days. Halverson had specifically designed the operation around that 30-day window. Every one of the 1,640 reoffenders had been rearrested after the 30-day flag period had passed. That protocol had been recommended for revision 12 years earlier in a Department of Justice internal review. The author of that recommendation was Marcus Halverson. He had recommended extending the flag period. The recommendation had been quietly shelved. He had retired the following year, and he had spent the next 9 years exploiting the exact 30-day gap he had once recommended closing. If a bribery network this large could operate for 9 years inside a state parole board, releasing nearly 3,000 inmates connected to organized crime, and producing more than 400 documented violent offenses against unsuspecting victims, how many other administrative protocols are still operating tonight with the same 30-day gap in boards no auditor has flagged yet?